I never planned on going to that party. In fact, the whole week, I had been avoiding people altogether. Work had drained me. Home felt like a silent hallway. And my relationship, well, it had slowly turned into something that looked more like a partnership than love. We shared the same bed, the same house, the same routine, but somehow not the same feelings anymore. So when my friends kept insisting, "You need a break, just come for an hour," I agreed only because saying no felt heavier than saying yes. The house was bigger than I expected, glowing with warm lights spilling from the windows and thumping with music that vibrated through the pavement. I remember standing outside for a moment, breathing in the cold night air and telling myself I had absolutely no reason to be nervous. It was just a party, people dancing, drinking, laughing. Nothing more. Nothing dangerous. Nothing life-changing. But life-changing moments rarely announce themselves before they happen. Inside, the atmosphere swallowed me. Neon light stretched across the walls. People hovered in small groups, talking in bursts of laughter. I walked deeper into the crowd, pretending I was comfortable, pretending I belonged there even though I felt like a misplaced piece in someone else's puzzle. The IT was then that I noticed them point three men standing near the back, half in shadow, half in the shifting color of the lights. They weren't loud like the others. They weren't trying to dominate the room. They simply watched, calm, composed, as if they could see more than what was happening on the surface. It was strange how I noticed them so quickly, like my eyes were led there before my mind caught up. One of them nodded slightly when our eyes met, a subtle acknowledgement I hadn't expected. I looked away instantly, pretending I hadn't been staring. I grabbed a drink from the counter, not because I wanted it, but because it gave my hands something to do. I told myself to relax, to breathe, to just get through the next hour. But when I glanced back, the three men were no longer where they had been. Before I could process it, I felt a presence beside me. Then another. And then the third stepped forward with a quiet confidence that made everything else in the room feel far away. "You look a little lost," the first one said, voice low and warm that I forced a small smile. "I don't really know many people here." "That's okay," the second replied. "Neither do we." It was such a simple response, but something about it disarmed me. They didn't crowd me or speak over each other. They weren't trying to impress me. They just stood there, steady, aware, almost as if they had decided I was worth paying attention to. And that feeling, being seen so clearly after months of feeling invisible, hit me harder than any drink could. The third man tilted his head. "You want to sit somewhere quieter? It's loud here." I didn't answer immediately. Part of me hesitated, unsure why they cared, unsure why I felt drawn to them. But the music really was overwhelming, and the thought of conversation that didn't require shouting felt like a relief. "Sure," I said quietly, surprising myself. They didn't rush or usher me. They simply walked ahead, letting me follow if I chose to. That alone made me feel strangely safe. As we moved through the crowd, I felt eyes on us, not in judgment, but curiosity. Maybe people wondered why three strangers had singled me out. Maybe they didn't. But my heart beat faster anyway, not out of fear, but something else. Something I didn't want to name. That we reached the hallway, dimly lit and much quieter. I could hear my own breathing again. One of them opened a door at the very end, revealing a small room lit with soft amber light. Nothing dramatic, just a couch, a few chairs, and a small table with bottled water. It felt private, but not hidden. Calm, but not suspicious. Still, crossing that threshold felt like stepping into a moment I would remember forever. "You can come in if you want," one of them said gently. "If not, that's okay too." That simple sentence undid something in me, because it had been so long since anyone gave me a choice with no pressure attached. So long since someone allowed me space instead of expecting something from me. I didn't think, I just stepped inside. The door clicked softly behind us, not locking, just settling into place. The music outside faded into a distant hum. For a moment, all four of us stood there in a quiet. I didn't know how to break point. One of the men handed me a bottle of water. "You look tense." "Long week," I muttered. "Long everything," he said knowingly, as if he had read my thoughts before I even spoke them. They sat around the room. Not too close, not too far. They made space for me on the couch, but didn't force me to sit. The air was warmer here, calmer, like the room existed outside the world for a moment. And maybe that's why I let my guard down faster than I should have, that we started talking. Simple things at first. My job, their hobbies, music, travel. Nothing risky, nothing deep. But even the small talk felt different, because they listened, really listened. Not distracted, not pretending. Every word I said was met with genuine attention. And slowly, something inside me loosened, like a knot that had been tightening for months was finally being untangled, but I didn't realize how much I had missed the feeling of being heard, of being valued. At one point, I caught myself smiling at something one of them said, and it startled me. I couldn't remember the last time I'd smiled without forcing it. The realization hit me hard, so hard that I looked away for a moment, afraid that my expression had revealed too much. "You okay?" the confident one asked softly. Yeah, I lied. Just thinking. About what? I hesitated. My thoughts flashed to my partner at home, the distance growing between us, the silence at dinner, the unspoken resentment. But I didn't mention any of that. Instead, I said the safer truth. "I guess I'm surprised I'm even talking to you guys." Tonight wasn't supposed to feel different. The quietest of the three leaned forward slightly, his expression calm. Sometimes you meet people at the right moment, even if the moment feels wrong. Those words stayed in the air like heat. I felt them more than I understood them. The night outside the room went on, music thumping, people laughing, drinks pouring, but inside time seemed to slow. I didn't know what this connection meant. I didn't know why it felt so easy, so strangely comforting. All I knew was that I had stepped into this room as someone who felt unseen, and now three strangers were staring at me like I mattered. And deep down, I feared what that feeling might lead to. The room stayed quiet for a while after that, the kind of silence that isn't empty, but charged, like the air itself is holding its breath. I found myself sinking further into the couch, unsure if it was the soft cushions or the calmness around me that made me relax. For the first time in months, I felt a strange ease. Not happiness exactly, but relief. Relief that someone actually cared enough to listen. They began asking me questions, not the small talk questions of a party, but the kind that made me pause. "What do you really want in life?" one asked. I blinked, caught off guard. Usually, people don't care what I want. They ask about my work, my home, my past, but rarely about my dreams. I hesitated, then found myself speaking, slowly at first, then with growing honesty. The men listened. Not a single interruption, no judgment, just listening that I told them about my frustrations, the monotony of days that felt identical, the quiet dinners, the empty laughter at home, and the weight of being unseen. And somehow, speaking it aloud made it more real, more painful, but also less lonely. They nodded, occasionally exchanging glances, not in a conspiratorial way, but like they understood in ways I hadn't known anyone could. "You've carried this for a long time," said one softly. "No wonder you're tense." "Igusi used. I never talk about it," I admitted. "No one ever really listens." "Then it's good you're talking now," the second said. His voice was calm, even, but it carried weight. It was the kind of voice that made you want to be honest, to keep speaking because it promised safety. There was a pause, and then something shifted subtly in the air. Not physically, not anything anyone could see, but in the way I felt. Attention. Pure, undistracted attention. I realized that this is what I had been missing. Not excitement, not chaos, but someone truly seeing me. And it felt intoxicating. I didn't want to leave this feeling, even though every rational part of me screamed that I should be elsewhere, that I should be thinking of my partner, that I should not be letting myself feel this warmth from strangers. One of them leaned back, eyes thoughtful. "You deserve to feel this, to feel seen. And yet, I can tell you haven't felt it in a while. Isn't that strange?" I laughed, a small, bitter laugh. Strange is one word for it. Lonely is another. And foolish is the one I keep repeating to myself in my head. "No one's calling you foolish," he replied. "You're human. Feeling human is the hard part." I shifted on the couch, aware of my heartbeat rising. The weight of my own emotions pressed against me, heavy but strangely exhilarating. I wanted to disappear into this moment and stay there forever, even though I knew I couldn't. I kept telling myself it was just conversation, just comfort, just a pause in the night, but part of me knew it was more. Part of me knew that I was teetering on a line I had no intention of crossing yet, but I was aware it existed. The quiet one broke the silence next. Do you ever feel guilty for wanting attention? I stared at him, surprised. I hadn't spoken it aloud, but yes. Constantly. Even when my partner and I were together, I felt a little spark of resentment, or maybe longing, because attention had become a rare commodity in my life. And admitting it, even here to strangers, was both terrifying and relieving. Yes, I said softly. All the time. They nodded. No judgment. No pushing. Just understanding. That's when I realized I was starting to trust them, maybe too quickly, maybe in a way that should have made me cautious. But trust felt good. It felt necessary. Point. One of them leaned forward slightly. It's normal to crave validation, he said. It's normal to want to be noticed, to feel like you matter. You've just been denying yourself that because it's hard to ask for it at home. I swallowed. He was right. Every word hit me harder than I wanted to admit. I hadn't wanted to see it, but the truth was staring me in the face. And for some reason, telling it to them, this small group of strangers, felt easier than ever telling it to the person I loved most. I caught my own reflection in the window, seeing the party lights behind me, and felt a pang of guilt. I shouldn't be here, I murmured. Why not? Asked the first. You're here now. Doesn't that count for something? It did count for something, I realized, though it also counted for nothing in a way that made my stomach twist. I was both present and absent, here physically, but elsewhere in thought, torn between loyalty and the simple need to be understood. That we fell into silence after that, the kind that felt safe, the kind that whispered possibilities I wasn't ready to name. And yet, even as I sat there, I knew I was standing on a precipice. Not a literal one, not a physical one, but an emotional one. I could step back and retreat into my old life, return to the patterns I had lived with for years, or I could continue to allow myself to feel something I hadn't felt in so long. Something that both exhilarated and terrified me. Time became hard to measure. I was aware of the music and laughter outside, aware of the house still alive with celebration. But inside, minutes felt like hours. And in that strange stretch of suspended time, I allowed myself to acknowledge the truth. I was drawn to them. Not in the obvious sense people think of when they imagine infidelity, but in the way someone might be drawn to sunlight after months of rain, desperate for warmth, desperate for visibility, desperate for acknowledgement. The tension in the room grew, not dramatic, not threatening, but subtle and electric. I realized my pulse had quickened, my thoughts were scattered, my chest heavier with feelings I hadn't admitted before. I wanted to laugh, to cry, to confess, to run, and maybe to stay, all at the same time. You can tell us anything, the quiet one said finally. Anything you've been holding in, even the things you think you shouldn't. I paused. My mind raced, memories flickering through my head, small moments at home where I'd felt unseen, tiny disappointments that had accumulated into mountains, nights when I had turned away from my partner not because of anger, but because I'd stopped feeling like I mattered. I started, my voice trembling slightly. I don't know why I'm here. I don't know why I'm letting myself talk to people I barely know. But it feels like for the first time in a long time, someone cares what I think. Someone actually sees me. They nodded. Silence settled again, but it was warm this time, comforting. I realized that I had opened a door I didn't even know existed, and now I was standing in its frame, unsure if I would step back or forward. The night stretched on. Outside, the party continued. Inside, we talked, shared moments, laughed quietly, listened, and all the while, the pull of being noticed, being valued, being understood grew stronger. That I knew that when I left this room, nothing would be the same. Something had shifted inside me, something subtle yet irreversible. I didn't know what the consequences would be: guilt, revelation, heartbreak. But in that moment, I allowed myself to surrender to the feeling. Not to actions, not to choices, but to the raw, undeniable truth of being seen. And I feared it, yet I couldn't look away.
The room had grown quieter than I thought possible. The music outside was a distant heartbeat, almost irrelevant, as if the world beyond that door had paused to let this moment stretch. I sank deeper into the couch, aware of every subtle shift, the gentle movements of the three men, the way their eyes met mine briefly, the careful calm in their voices. It was strange how safe it felt, even as I realized how dangerously connected I was becoming to them emotionally. They didn't press me. They didn't lean too close or ask anything that made me uncomfortable. And yet, their attentiveness was intoxicating, more addictive than anything I'd felt in months. I wanted to linger, to bask in the sensation of being seen and understood, even though a part of me screamed that this was wrong. I found myself opening up more than I had intended. I spoke about the quiet suffocation of my daily life, about the invisible walls between me and my partner, about the loneliness that had crept into the spaces where love should have been. Each word left my mouth and hung in the room, and instead of judgment, I was met with empathy. They nodded, sometimes exchanged glances, always encouraging, always patient. "You're carrying a lot," one said softly. His tone didn't pity me. It acknowledged me, validated me. That simple act, more than anything else, made me ache in ways I couldn't quite name. "Yes," I admitted, and I didn't even realize how heavy it had become until now. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was loaded, charged, electric. I could feel my pulse in my throat, my stomach tight with anticipation, my mind racing between desire and guilt. I knew what I felt wasn't just comfort. It was more. It was dangerous. Emotional danger, the kind that makes your head spin and your heart ache at the same time. "You're human," the quietest one said suddenly, almost as if reading my thoughts. "You crave connection. It's natural. It doesn't make you bad. But it does make this complicated." I nodded, swallowing hard. Complicated. That word didn't even begin to cover it. I was aware that every fiber of my being was drawn toward them, drawn to their attention, their understanding, their silent acknowledgement that I mattered. Yet, I also knew that every moment I lingered was another thread fraying in the fabric of the life I had left behind. One of them shifted, leaning back slightly. "It's strange," he murmured. "How quickly someone can change the way you feel about yourself. Just by listening, just by noticing." I laughed, a quiet, bitter sound. I never realized how starved I was for that, until now. Their eyes met mine, not in a way that was accusatory or expectant, but with understanding. And in that understanding, I felt my walls crumble. All the caution, all the self-restraint, began to melt away. I knew I was stepping closer to a line I had never intended to cross. The line of emotional infidelity, where desire and longing intertwine with guilt and secrecy. It wasn't just temptation, it was clarity. I had been blind to the cracks in my own life, blind to the emptiness that had settled into my relationship. And now, illuminated by their attention, the truth was unavoidable. I had been starving for acknowledgement, for presence, for care. And they had given it to me, not forcefully, not manipulatively, but simply, naturally. The quiet one leaned forward, voice barely above a whisper. "You can admit things here. You can say the things you wouldn't say anywhere else. And it won't make us think less of you. It's safe, safe." That word struck me deeper than anything else. Safe to feel, safe to express, safe to exist in a way I hadn't allowed myself in months. I realized I was trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the intensity of feeling something I had suppressed for so long. I let myself speak. "I feel guilty," I admitted. "Because I want this. Because I want to stay here and feel seen and appreciated. And I know it's wrong." They nodded, but didn't condemn. Instead, they offered silence and presence. That combination was almost unbearable. I felt simultaneously comforted and exposed, validated and ashamed. Every part of me knew I was crossing a boundary I couldn't uncross. And yet, I stayed. I wanted to stay. Time seemed to stretch. The minutes felt like hours, and with every passing second, I felt the pull of temptation grow stronger. Not physical temptation, but emotional, an attraction to being noticed, to being valued, to feeling like I mattered. I tried to fight it, tried to remind myself of my partner, of the life I had built, of promises I had made. But every reminder collided with the overwhelming sense of being alive, of being truly understood in a way that had been missing for far too long. "You're not alone in this," one said softly, noticing the conflict in my eyes. "We all crave attention, all crave validation. What matters is how you handle it after." I nodded, biting my lip. I wanted to respond, to explain, to justify, to retreat, to stay, all at once. My emotions had become a storm, and I had no anchor. I was suspended in the tension between desire and guilt, between longing and loyalty. And then it happened, not something tangible, not something that could be pointed to, but something deeper. I allowed myself to feel completely seen, completely acknowledged, completely understood. And in that moment, I crossed the invisible line. My heart opened in a way I hadn't intended, in a way that made the outside world, my partner, my life, feel distant. For a brief, suspended instant, I let myself exist solely in that room, with them, in their presence, in the intimacy of attention and understanding. When I finally looked at them, I realized I had been holding my breath. The weight of my actions, or rather, the weight of my emotions, pressed down on me. I hadn't done anything physical, but emotionally, I had already crossed a threshold. The realization hit me like a wave. I was torn between exhilaration and guilt, desire and shame. I shouldn't feel this way, I whispered, though not to them. To myself. You can feel it, one said softly, almost gently reprimanding me for doubting myself. Feeling isn't the same as acting. But hiding it, that's the hard part. The words sank deep. I realized that what mattered now wasn't what had happened, but what I chose next. The room had offered comfort and temptation, understanding and validation. But when I left it, I would have to face my own life. The choices, the consequences, the unspoken truths. I rose slowly from the couch, my hands trembling slightly, my chest tight with a mixture of longing and remorse. I didn't know how I would walk out of that room and return to the world I had left behind. I didn't know if I could face my partner, if I could reconcile what I had allowed myself to feel, or if this moment would linger in my heart like a secret shadow. The door opened quietly, and I stepped out. The music and laughter hit me like a wave, jarring me back to reality. But inside, something had irrevocably changed. I had been seen. I had been understood. I had felt alive in ways I hadn't for years. And I feared, more than anything, what that would mean for the life I had left behind. As I walked away, I realized the truth: infidelity doesn't always come in actions. Sometimes, it comes in feeling. Sometimes, it comes in moments of being completely, unmistakably alive with someone else while leaving your other life behind in the shadow. And sometimes, the hardest part is knowing that even if nothing was done, everything had already shifted. Morning came slowly, the sunlight seeping into my room in pale, quiet streams. I woke with a weight pressing against my chest, heavier than sleep could erase. The events of the night before replayed in my mind, not vividly, not in detail, but in emotion. Every glance, every word, every subtle understanding lingered like smoke I couldn't shake. I had crossed a line, though physically nothing had occurred. Emotionally, I had betrayed the trust I had built, and it settled on me like a cold, persistent fog. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor, heart hammering in rhythm with the thoughts I tried to suppress. I knew I couldn't ignore this. The truth of what I had allowed myself to feel couldn't remain hidden, at least not in my own mind. The comfort and attention I had received from the three men had pulled me into an intoxicating warmth, but that warmth had come at the cost of clarity, at the cost of loyalty, at the cost of honesty with the person I loved most. I glanced at my phone, the screen bright against the dim morning light, and I felt the weight of the silence waiting there. My partner hadn't called. My partner hadn't texted. And yet, I knew they sensed the shift in me, as they always did. The distance had been growing for months, and now it was widened by a night I could neither undo nor explain away. Eventually, I forced myself to leave the room. I moved through the house quietly, careful not to make a sound, careful not to betray the turbulence inside me. Each step felt heavier than the last, as though I was carrying the night with me, pressing it into my chest like a stone. When I entered the living room, I found my partner sitting on the couch, staring at the morning light filtering through the curtains. They looked calm, almost serene, but there was an undercurrent in their eyes that spoke of perception, of intuition. I felt myself faltering, knowing that my own guilt had already made me transparent. "Morning," they said softly. "Morning," I replied, my voice low, unsure, brittle. There was a pause. I knew that they were waiting, not for an immediate confession, but for a recognition of the change they sensed in me. My hands trembled slightly as I sat opposite them, searching for words that could convey the complexity of what had happened without betraying everything. I need to tell you something," I began, my throat tight. "Something that happened last night. And I need to be honest because I can't carry it alone. They looked at me carefully, eyes narrowing slightly, not with anger, but with the anticipation of truth. I went to the party, I said, and I ended up in a room with some people. It was emotional. I let myself feel something I shouldn't have. I didn't act physically, but emotionally, I crossed a line. I allowed myself to feel alive in a way that wasn't with you. Silence followed. Heavy, suffocating, unbroken silence. Their eyes searched mine, not for blame, but for understanding, for the measure of my honesty. I could feel my own chest tightening under the weight of exposure, as if the words themselves had drawn all the air from the room. Finally, they spoke. You felt what? I felt noticed. I felt seen, I admitted. For the first time in months, maybe longer, someone made me feel like I mattered. And I can't take that back. I don't know if it's right, I don't know if it's fair, but that's what happened. And I needed to tell you. They were quiet again, staring at me, absorbing my confession. I saw hurt flicker in their eyes, quickly masked by restraint. The tension between us was almost unbearable. I had wanted to protect them from this, but honesty demanded exposure, and now we both had to confront the aftermath. What does this mean for us? They asked finally, voice trembling slightly. Not with anger, but with pain. I don't know, I said honestly. I made a mistake emotionally. I let myself feel something I shouldn't have. But I still love you. I still want this to work. I don't want to lose what we have. I need to fix myself, and us. The morning stretched on. We talked. We argued softly, quietly, each word carrying weight. There were tears, but not from dramatic outbursts, only from the exhaustion of emotions finally surfacing. The conversation was raw, honest, and necessary. I realized that infidelity is never just a single act. It starts in silence, grows in neglect, and explodes in truth. And now, facing the truth, we had to decide what to do with it. By the time the sun rose higher in the sky, we had reached a fragile understanding. Not forgiveness yet, not absolution, but acknowledgement. We agreed to rebuild, to communicate better, to confront the cracks that had been ignored for too long. The night's events would remain a lesson, painful, unavoidable, and formative, but it would not be the end of us if we chose to repair the trust. I spent the rest of the morning reflecting, walking quietly through the spaces of our home. I thought about the three men at the party, the room that had become both sanctuary and temptation, the warmth of attention, the pull of being understood. I realized that what I craved wasn't novelty or excitement. It was recognition, empathy, and emotional intimacy. And if I didn't address that within my own relationship, the same gap would keep opening, the same mistakes would recur. I approached my partner again, taking their hands gently. I know I've hurt you, I said. And I know this will take time. But I promise I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make this right. To rebuild trust. To be present. They nodded, eyes glistening, voice soft. I want to believe you. And I want to try. But it will take time, and we'll need to be honest, always. Yes, I whispered, relief and fear mingling in equal measure. Always. The day went on, quiet and reflective. We shared space without distraction, speaking when necessary, listening when needed, feeling the weight of both guilt and hope. And though the shadow of the night lingered, it was tempered by the determination to confront the cracks in our relationship instead of hiding from them. By evening, I understood something fundamental. Infidelity isn't always physical. It often begins in emotional absence, in silence, in unmet needs. And healing doesn't come from hiding or denying, it comes from facing the truth, accepting responsibility, and choosing to rebuild what has been threatened. As night fell again, I looked at my partner and felt both fear and gratitude. Fear of what could have been, of what might happen if I faltered again. Gratitude for the willingness to stay, to try, to see me despite my mistakes. And in that quiet, faceless moment, I realized that love isn't just passion or desire, it's the courage to face ourselves, our failures, and each other, even when it hurts. I had stepped into a room and felt seen by strangers. But the real challenge, the real growth, lay in returning to the life I had almost abandoned emotionally, and choosing, every day, to stay, to repair, and to love again. The night was calm, the house quiet. And I finally felt, for the first time in months, that I was beginning to breathe again, not just for myself, but for us.